Hundreds of thousands of Israelis have taken part in the largest of a series of protests that have rocked the country for months. The demonstrators are angry at the high cost of living and want the government to revamp its social policies. RT's Paulus Lear is following what appears to be the largest anti-government rally in the nation's history.
It is the climax of nearly 2 months of social protests here in Israel, the largest that this country has ever seen. Now, for weeks, organizers have been dubbing it the Million Man March. They were really hoping that 1 million people would turn out on the streets of Israel. Though we're hearing figures of some 350,000. That's 350,000 in 10 cities, where here in Tel Aviv is the main focal point. Various speakers as well as artists have been addressing the crowd. The rallying call remains that of social justice, with people here demanding that the Netanyahu government change its focus away from issues of security to issues of social justice, with people here saying that it is simply too expensive to live in Israel. And yet, instead of concentrating on domestic problems, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been focused on the international stage. On September the 20th, Palestinians will go to the United Nations to declare a state. And Netanyahu has responded by arming settlers and trying to convince countries not to support the Palestinian move, instead of listening to the disgruntled masses at home. Now, one of the new slogans we're hearing is, "Where were you September 3rd?" That is a throwback to November the 4th, 1995, when the former Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated. People say, where were you then? So, of course, people here saying, where are you now? With people really wanting to come to the streets and make a change and make their voices heard. This is the last social protest that is being planned for some time. Although the vibe here is quite hyped up, there no doubt is some disappointment that the Million Man March was not reached.
For more on the implications of the social unrest, we can now talk to Gershon Baskin, who's an analyst of the Israel-Palestinian conflict. Mr. Baskin, thank you very much for being here with us in the program. Now, first off, are the ongoing protests in Israel a sign the Arab Spring has now reached the Jewish state?
Well, I think that we are living in the region in the Middle East. What's going on in the region has had its impact here, but we must recognize that the demonstrations and the social upheaval in Israel is very different from what's going on in the neighboring Arab countries. Israel is a democracy, and regimes are changed here through the ballot box and not on the streets. But the protests here are about social and economic policies, a sense that Israel is heading in the wrong direction, that the gaps between rich and poor are growing, that it's harder to make ends meet, and it's really an uprising of the Israeli middle class.
Well, you yourself taken part in the protests. So what actually the protesters are demanding? How valid are the social concerns of the demonstrators?
The social concerns are extremely valid. The gaps between rich and poor in Israel have grown from a society that 30 years ago was one of the most egalitarian in the world today to the second of gaps between rich and poor, only after the United States. We have a problem of increasing privatization, a philosophy that our Prime Minister adheres to. And what we've seen privatized in Israel over the past years are social services which should be provided by the government in education, health, and welfare. We have teachers who are hired by private associations, social workers who are hired by non-profit organizations in order not to give them their social benefits. And again, the cost of living keeps going up, and people earning 2 salaries, a 2-family household with the cost of education, health, and welfare cannot make it to the end of the month.
Well, Mr. Baskin, whose concerns are exactly addressed there? I mean, are the concerns of the Palestinians being addressed? And also the protests that are taking place now, as you said, the protesters are upset about the lack of affordable housing in the country. Do you think this could trigger the government to further expand settlements?
It could, but I think that we've heard a lot of voices in Israel when asking the protesters and those who are leading them, where should the money come to pay for all these social services and to close the gaps? 2 answers that come up quite often is, one, take money away from the very high military budget, and the other is to transfer money which is going from the settlements in the occupied territories to building inside of Israel proper. So there's a conflict here. This government of Israel today is a right-wing, religious-supported government which supports supports the continuation of building settlements, and there will be conflict here. But this social movement has not been about the occupation. It has not been about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. In the big demonstration in Tel Aviv last night, not one word was mentioned about Palestinian-Israeli conflict or the occupied territories. In Jerusalem, 2 speakers did mention it and got applauded from the public. But it's not a demonstration about war and peace. It's a demonstration about social and economic policies.
Well, as we know, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been criticized for taking time to campaign against the upcoming UN vote on Palestinian statehood instead of tackling social problems at home. So what's your view on this?
Well, I think that the government of Israel is making a big mistake by not seeing a September 20th UN session as an opportunity for Israel. Mr. Netanyahu officially supports the two-state solution. What the Palestinians are trying to do is to preserve the validity, the viability of a two-state solution by bringing it to a decision of the international community at a time when they believe they cannot make any progress in bilateral negotiations with Israel. So I think that the government of Israel is making a big mistake by not capitalizing on the opportunity of trying to come up with an agreed-upon UN resolution which could serve as the grounds for renewing negotiations with the Palestinian on the delineation of borders, on the modalities for running Jerusalem, on security arrangements. This could move us forward. Instead, we have a situation where Israel, the United States, and some other European countries are trying to oppose the Palestinian move, and I fear that this might lead to another round of violence.
All right, Gershon Boskin, analyst of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Thanks very much indeed for being here with us in the program and sharing your reviews with us.